This happened a couple of weeks ago. I just recently graduated from high school. I never really had an easy time making friends, but during quarantine I got pretty close to a couple of old acquaintances named Kevin and John. Kevin is a tall, fat kid with a ridiculously big head, short, unkempt dark brown hair, and a chin strap. John is even taller than Kevin and around 6'4", but very skinny, with light brown hair and a zit-covered face. I actually weigh more than him despite being almost a foot shorter. They were the kind of kids that always would get into trouble, whether they're drinking, smoking, or busting into places they're not supposed to be. Anyway, even though I do some sketchy shit sometimes, drinking and smoking wasn't really my thing. Despite that, they forced me to hang out with them, and I somewhat enjoyed their company in return. We got along very well because of how we saw everyone as fake, which is weird because that's exactly what they were. This one particular time, I even let them drive my car. They took me to a place in the woods where they'd forced me to smoke. Looking back, I know they were really just using me for my car. I'm not sure why I decided to give them second chances after all the weird things they did, but I still did so anyway. About a month ago, despite many people warning me not to hang out with them anymore, I let them take me to a party against my better judgment. I was suspicious though, so I took my own car and followed them there. In retrospect, the first red flag was when they parked 2 streets away from the party, but I didn't think anything at first. As they were walking to the house, they got excited to see me crash a party, but I thought that part was a joke. We got to the address and got turned away right away. Kevin tried to convince them to let us in, but it still didn't work. I texted the host and asked him to explain what was happening. He told me we could talk tomorrow. At that point, I knew they were just using me for their own enjoyment again, but I was a lot nicer to Kevin and John than I probably should have been. In the heat of the moment, I told them I was going to drive by, honk a bunch, and yell "fuck you" to them. I had second thoughts as soon as I said it, but now I knew John and Kevin were expecting me to do it, so I drove by the wrong street accidentally with them right on my bumper the entire time. I then drove to my house, which they luckily didn't follow me back to. Feeling upset about being used again, I just went to bed. The next day, I came to a realization and decided that enough was enough. I was tired of fake people and them using me for everything, and I knew I needed to cut them off. I texted John's girlfriend Kyra and told her to tell Kevin and John to never talk to me again, which she actually did. I explained the whole situation the best I could. I just hoped it wouldn't affect their relationship too much. Well, that very night, I got a text on Snapchat from John. "Kyra dumped me because of you, you fucking asshole." In all caps with 3 middle finger emojis. Right then, I also got a text from Kevin, which was pretty similar as well. He called me the C word and warned me to stay away from him and John from now on. I laughed to myself, thinking they really wouldn't dare do anything. They had admitted to me before they weren't as tough as they like to act, and here they were threatening me. I guess I should have taken this text more seriously. That Friday, my mother spent the day at the hospital getting some new medication for her MS. She had to spend the entire day there, since it had to be administered through an IV. My dad called me at around 5 and said she was having some side effects. She'd be okay, but she would need to spend the entire night, meaning I'd be home alone because my dad wanted to stay with her. I stayed up for a while playing Madden with all the lights off, when suddenly my neighbor called me. Confused, I picked up the phone. He sounded quite panicked. He told me I needed to hide right now and wait for the police. His wife had already called them, and they were only a couple of minutes away. I was extremely startled and confused. "What the hell are you talking about?" He dropped a bomb. He told me he'd just seen 2 people hop the fence into my backyard and start sneaking towards my house. I think my heart skipped a beat when he said that. I wondered why he didn't start off with that, but I guess it didn't matter. I had to hide right now. I went into my closet and shut the door tight. From there, I instantly heard the sound of glass breaking and slow footsteps into the common area of my house. Thankfully, the police arrived shortly thereafter, because they often already had a car sitting near my house looking for speeders anyway on the main road. It felt, though, like an hour could have gone by while I was waiting. I heard multiple police officers shouting at the intruders, and shortly after, I heard a knock on the bedroom door, followed by an officer announcing himself. I yelled for him to come in, and he opened the closet door and took me back into the house. From there, I saw one of the windows in the kitchen was completely shattered, and unsurprisingly, I watched as two other officers escorted Kevin and John out of my house, both in handcuffs. My parents got back home soon after, and my dad hugged me for at least a minute. In the moment, my mom really didn't understand what was happening because of how loopy the medicine made her, but the next day she broke down in tears over how close I was to dying. A lot of things about that incident have been bothering me. The way I completely underestimated them, the evil looks they gave me as they were escorted out, and the fear I had when this was all happening. I'll get over all of that eventually, but one thing will always stick with me, and that's what I heard the police say when they first entered down the hallway. 3 words that completely changed my perspective on life. Drop the gun. Police told me Kevin and John were crouched in the foyer, and Kevin had a pistol in his hand. They believed they were waiting for me to come out of my room so they could shoot me when I didn't expect it. I still haven't totally wrapped my head around the fact things could have gone so much worse if my neighbor hadn't seen them climbing my fence. I guess it serves as a reminder of how you never know when it's your time, and to always take threats like that seriously. I've worked a few odd jobs in my life. My first job was a summer job at 16 during summer break at a dairy farm. I absolutely hated it there, and it made it harder for me to find motivation to even try working again when the time eventually came. I don't really remember how I was first referred to this job, but the following summer I ended up working as an office assistant for a self-employed photographer. My parents knew her because she used to be a member of their church, and my sister attended her 4-H program when she had it. By this time, her health had begun to take a severe hit. She claimed it was a mixture of things, like chronic Lyme to fibromyalgia. I had also been warned by my parents before taking the job that she was a little bit off. She was very religious and claimed to have had real encounters with demons, even participated in a few exorcisms. I'm an atheist and a skeptic, so I never took those stories very seriously. Aside from the weird things she would tell me, she was mostly harmless, and working for her was not hard either. The job basically just required me to do a whole lot of data entry, as well as helping prep her photos with some minor touching up and the addition of her company watermark. Then I'd upload them to a site where her customers could browse them and pick out which ones they wanted to order. She primarily photographed horsing events, and for the first several months my job stayed in her living room, which was basically my office space at the time. Eventually, though, she talked me into tagging along at shows where she trained me as a photographer as well, and very soon I was shooting events right alongside her. It was pretty boring work, I won't lie. I'm not exactly a horse person. Things didn't get weird until a year later, when I learned the hard way that it was not her I needed to worry about. Turns out she had 2 sons. One was out of state. The other was in the Navy. The latter of the 2, a guy called Nate, I had only heard very few things about. I knew he was somewhere on the autism spectrum, but she was never exactly clear on what his diagnosis was. She very firmly believed he was vaccine injured, and all his oddities could be traced back to vaccines or something. When he finally returned home, I met him for the first time while working in her living room. All in all, he seemed like a very nice guy, actually. A little bit odd with the social cues and stuff, but not concerning. He was obsessed with movies, and being a bit of a movie buff myself, whenever he would venture into the living room to strike up a conversation, it would almost always be about whatever movies we were into or excited to see. I should also point out here I was only 18 by this point, and he was well into his mid-30s. At some point, he must have got it into his head that I was interested in him. Though he never said anything directly to me, I had to find out about it from my own parents. My mom worked as the secretary at her church and Nate knew it. I can only guess my boss had told him. One afternoon, Nate showed up at my mom's desk and just started gushing about me. He talked about how much fun I was, how he loved talking to me, how he was planning to take me to the movies and take me to his church, all these other plans he had for me. My mom was of course beyond uncomfortable, as was the pastor who happened to overhear it. When I got home that night, she told me what had happened and suggested I make sure not to lead him on. I was completely baffled because I really hadn't done anything. We'd never even discussed the possibility of doing anything together. I got even more uncomfortable around him when I overheard a conversation between himself and my boss in the next room. He was talking about his experiences in the Navy, while she was talking about the dangers of Islam. At one point, he said in this completely serious tone, "You know, if I had it my way, I'd just shoot and kill any Muslim I met. Problem solved." My boss simply laughed the comment off like it was nothing, but something about his serious tone creeped me out. I made an effort to acknowledge him less and less when he was around, and keep the conversation short while stressing I had work to do. Eventually, he got his own place and moved out of his parents' house, so I figured that was problem solved. A couple of years later, I also moved out. My boss's company had since closed, and I was now working somewhere new. I was friends with both my previous boss and Nate on Facebook, and around that time I was finally coming out as an atheist, something I could not do when I was still living at home. One random night, my old boss suddenly messaged me, asking about a ring I had on my finger in a picture. It was a black ring with a white gold star in the middle of a black circle. Already knowing where she was going with this, I told her it was just a ring for decoration. Then she started accusing me of wearing a pentagram because she didn't know what a pentacle was and that I was promoting Satan somehow. I tried several times to explain to her that not only was it not that symbol, but also paganism has nothing to do with Satan anyways, but she refused to listen to anything I said, so I ignored her. This was fairly typical behavior for her and really not worth the argument. The very next morning, I received a message from Nate telling me I needed to come to church with him. I told him no. The messages I received back gradually grew angrier and angrier. He went from asking to demanding I go with him. He told me I was lost, and I would not find the answers I needed by living the life I was. Eventually, he outright said he thought the fact I was wearing a pentagram was disgusting, and I was opening myself up for possession. Knowing there would be even less of a point in arguing with him than there was with his mother, I went ahead and blocked them both, deciding I did not need either of them in my life anymore. Then, though, he started showing up at my workplace. He would always search through the entire store until he finally found me, and then once he did, he would corner me and not stop talking to me, no matter how many times I tried to dodge him or tell him that I was trying to work. Eventually, my managers caught on and started intercepting him whenever he would show up. I wasn't making enough to pay the rent with that job, so I had to take up a second one as well. Within a week, though, of working this second job, which was in a different town, he started showing up there too. This time, I told the managers outright what was going on, and after that, every time he showed up, I was allowed to hide in the back room behind a locked door while they sped his order along and got him out. During one of these many encounters while I was hiding in the back, one of the managers was back there with me, inputting employee time punches into the computer when both of us heard Nate shouting in our direction, "I know you remember me!" That was the last straw for them. They told him his business was no longer welcome there. He stopped showing up at my other job as well for a while, which was a relief. Fast forward a few years later, I was getting used to not having to look over my shoulder every shift or check the parking lot for his truck. Then one day he just suddenly reappeared. He happened to be browsing a section I was walking past when he spotted me and got this deer in the headlights look. I made a beeline to the break room because now just even seeing him made me scared. After that, he started showing up very regularly. I would always find ways to dodge and avoid him, but he would still somehow always spot me and know exactly where I was. I was debating whether or not to tell the managers again, because at this point it had been a while since he had really done anything, and saying something just because I felt nervous didn't feel right exactly. Call me a coward or an idiot or whatever, but that was how my thought process was working. What happened next, though, made me really regret not speaking up. It was bound to happen eventually, I guess. But one night he managed to catch me while I was at the customer service desk. He approached me, said hi, and I immediately started to look for someone to signal over so I could make a break for it. Before I could even say a word, he said something that made me sick to my stomach. "Hey, how's your little girl doing? She's 3 now, right?" I looked at him horrified. I had him completely blocked on everything. I had his number blocked. I was living at a new address. I had not seen or spoken to his mother since she confronted me about that ring. I hadn't told either of them I was a parent now or that I was married, and I was not friends with anyone who knew them either. But somehow he knew everything. "How's your husband doing too?" he asked when I didn't answer. "He's good. He's a good man," I said, trying to reinforce the idea I was not available to him and I had no desire to have anything to do with him. "Oh, really? Where does he work?" At this point, I felt like I was going to pass out. Thankfully, another employee approached just to gather some reshelves, and I got the hell out of there. As I was leaving, he called out behind me. "I'll see you again, you know. We'll talk. We'll go out and do something together. We will." I reported him to the managers, telling them everything about the encounter, including all that information he had on me and my family that he absolutely should not have. They were able to pull up his face on CCTV, and while I've not heard anything, I'm guessing one of them finally managed to approach him, because I haven't seen him since that incident. This has been going on for 10 years, and I want it to finally be over. I've never shared this story with anyone. I was always too afraid to be judged for it, so it's something I buried deep down until my friend brought it up just the other day. We both have daughters now, and we're talking about how we could best educate them on being safe when they're teenagers and experimenting with partying. When my best friend and I were 17 years old, we went to the beach for spring break with a couple of our guy friends. My friend was talking to this guy she had met through mutual friends. He wanted us to meet up with him at a house he and his friends had rented together. Our guy friends had long since ditched us to meet girls, so we decided to go ahead and go to her friend's house to hang out with them. When we got there, it was in the middle of the day. He took us inside and introduced us to everyone. Turns out almost all the guys were on a basketball team of the same university. We hung out and they were all drinking. My friend and I were not, though. One guy came out with 2 glasses of what appeared to be whiskey and coke. Against my better judgment, I started to sip it, as did my friend. There was one guy who appeared to be not athletic, though, and he was the only person at the house who was seemingly not friendly toward us. I'll call him Mike. Suddenly, I started to feel very buzzed. We were laughing and talking, and one guy asked me to put on his jersey. I grabbed it and put it on over my clothes. "No, take your clothes off and put it on," he said in a very aggressive tone. I was feeling more and more tipsy at this point, and I began to realize something was very wrong. Our parents had let us drink with them multiple times, so I already knew what it was like to be drunk. I knew exactly how much I could handle before getting that way too, and one drink had never made me feel like I was getting wasted. "Come on, quit babysitting that drink. Drink up, you weakling," one guy said, and they all laughed. Even though I had already stopped drinking, I could still feel myself getting more and more buzzed, especially since our drink had barely tasted of any whiskey. My dad always had whiskey at home, and we would drink a couple whiskey Pepsis on occasion. I would feel relaxed then, but this was much different. "We should go now. Our friends are waiting for us." I headed for the door. A couple of guys moved to stand in front of us. No, you can't leave. Come sit down over here for a little bit." They ushered us back to the couch. That sinking feeling hit my gut, and I knew we were now on borrowed time. I tried to stay calm and laughed, thinking of what to do. "I need to pee. Come with me." I grabbed my friend's hand and we went to the restroom together. We both stood there, and we had already read each other's minds. I put my hands on her head and looked in her eyes so we could both try our best to focus. We need to leave right now. Our phones both had spotty service all over the island, I'm guessing because there were so many people packed in such a tight space. Take my keys and tell them you're going to get your purse. I'll stay here. You go get the guys and come back for me. I knew this plan probably wouldn't work, but my mind was going crazy. As I opened the bathroom door, though, Mike was already standing there. My heart immediately sank. He had been rude to us earlier, and he'd probably just overheard our plan. He leaned in and whispered, "Follow me, and be quiet." Something inside me trusted him with everything I had in that moment. We followed him down a hallway into a garage and out through the front driveway. "Hurry up! Get out of here now!" We ran to the car and I drove off to our hotel. I remember driving sort of, but I don't even remember arriving to our condo. The rest of the story is from our guy friends, telling us what happened. Apparently, we walked in. The guys asked us where we had been, because it was already well into nighttime, and we were supposed to meet up for barbecue for some weenies. They said we didn't even say a word, just walked to our rooms, closed the door, and passed out. We didn't come out till the next day, and both of us had severe headaches, as if we'd drunk a whole bottle of cheap vodka all by ourselves. To the basketball douchebags who try to take advantage of two teenage girls, let's never meet again, or I will kick you in the dick. And thank you, Mike. I wish I could thank you. I hope you're out there reading this, and you remember the brunette and blonde little girls you saved that day on the island. This takes place over the course of a few years, from just before my university freshman year to just after my junior year. I'm now a 20-year-old female, but at the start of this story I was 17 years old. For my freshman orientation, my family and I were staying at a hotel right across from my college campus. Orientation started in the morning, so I wandered over to campus with my luggage to check into my dorm room for the next few days. I was roomed alone, at least for orientation, since I have OCD and sleeping problems, and I didn't want to bother any potential roommates just moving in. I put my luggage away and began to walk around the campus. This entire fiasco started for one simple reason. That morning I wanted breakfast. It was extremely foggy, and I had never been on this campus before. It was a ways away from my hometown after all, so I very quickly became completely turned around. I spotted a group of 4 people walking toward a building, so I swallowed up my anxiety and approached them to ask for directions. I should add that I'm a shy and quiet person, so it took a bit before I piped up and, "Excuse me." One of the 4 turned around. My immediate thought was, oh my god, this guy looks just like a fish. He had these big, creepy eyes and these big, fat lips. He was blonde and a little bit chubby. This is purely for descriptive purposes, by the way. I'm not exactly a model myself. Still, I stifled my gawking and asked him politely, "Excuse me, do you know where the dining hall is?" "Oh, yeah, it's right there." He motioned to the building directly behind us. Oh wow, I'm so dumb. There was a small pause before he asked, "Are you here alone?" As someone who's run into predatory people before, this question never ever sits well with me. My family will be here later. We all have sleeping problems, so they're catching up on sleep right now, and they'll be here at 6 actually. This wasn't a lie, but I hoped it would deter him from latching on to me. "Oh, well, do you want to sit with us in the meantime?" I guessed that he meant the group of 4 he was in, but the other 3 had already disappeared into the dining hall. "Sure," I conceded. He immediately grabbed a 2-person table, which made me internally groan. I had a feeling where this was going, and I already wanted no part of it. I mean, I'm a lesbian for Christ's sake. I didn't want to risk making him angry. I didn't want someone to hate me before the school year had even started, so I sat down with him and a plate of eggs. I tried to make conversation to at least be polite, but he just kept on replying very dryly with things like, "Oh, uh-huh, mm-hmm." I thought I had upset this fish face somehow, so I looked up from my plate, only to see him staring directly at my breasts. I'm a 36 double D, so I'm unfortunately used to this. I sighed and bagged out my sweater around my chest. Even after this, and me slouching though, he just kept staring so blatantly. After this, I obviously didn't want anything to do with him. Unfortunately, I was not so lucky. Everywhere I went after that, he followed, even if our orientation events were completely separate. I repeatedly tried to give him the slip, becoming increasingly creeped out by his attempts at flirting, but everywhere I went, there was a fish face appearing. I gave it one last try, slipping away to the library. That's when the messages started. Somehow, this fish face had found my Snapchat. I guess he searched my name somehow. He kept messaging me things like, "Where are you? Where did you go? I'm right here." Knowing that he could see I'd read them, I felt obligated to respond. Okay, I'll be there soon, I guess. This didn't stop with orientation, though. The beginning of my freshman year was marred with fish face encounters. Classes, trips to the store, student activities off campus, it really didn't matter. He would be there every time shadowing me. The constant messaging as well drove me to just delete my Snapchat. Thank goodness he never actually managed to get my phone number. At this point, Fishface was incessantly hitting on me, reminding me how much he liked me, despite numerous times of me stating I'm not interested. When I made myself clear, it only seemed to make him push even harder, as if he thought I was trying to play games with him or something. It became more and more common for him to try and touch me or put his arm around me. This is where I drew the line. I told him very clear as day. "I'm not interested in you, I don't like men, don't touch me." He pouted but relented. In touching me, at least. The shadowing got even worse, to the point I couldn't even leave without my now roommate. I couldn't actually get a single dorm for the rest of the actual school year. I became more exhausted, paranoid, and began to feel like he was a time bomb waiting to blow. After weeks of this, weeks of sheer anxiety, I spoke to a priest at my university. The father was deeply concerned and even went so far as to walk me back to my dorm. He made me promise I would speak to security first thing the next day, which I agreed to. Of course, their first question was whether I was really being stalked or if my anxiety made me believe I was being stalked. When I cited all the witnesses to his shadowing me, that was dropped very quickly though. The next question was I clear enough with him? I don't really know how much clearer I could have been, really. After much back and forth like this, I finally managed to get a no-contact order with Fishface. I knew that a no-contact order only really meant he couldn't contact me and vice versa, rather than actually physically keeping him away from me. I was okay with this for now. I didn't want to seriously jeopardize the guy's entire future or anything. I just wanted him to leave me alone. For the remainder of the year, there were no more attempts to contact me or be near me. I thought that would be the end of it. But then came sophomore year. I could never be exactly sure if it was all a coincidence or if he was really tailing me, but he would start appearing outside of every classroom door, every coffee place, every store, absolutely everywhere. I was in a rough place this year too, totally unrelated to these events, but it certainly didn't help me feel any better. Due to the sheer emotional exhaustion I was battling, I really couldn't give a damn. Okay, follow me, whatever you want. I promise I'm really not that interesting. But this is when I learned of other victims. Their stories were identical to mine, 6 of them, mine being the 7th. They'd run into Fishface, a totally innocent encounter, and he just started in on them, bombarding them with messages, following them everywhere, groping them and trying to get them alone. I was horrified to find that every one of these other girls had already reported him to university security. Every one of them had also been prescribed a no-contact order. 7 victims later, and this bastard was still on campus, as if he'd never done anything wrong. I learned that this was not uncommon for our university, on top of all the victim blaming. The more I learned, the more deeply my fear ran. It was open season here, and these bastards had full protection. We couldn't do a single thing to get guys like Fishface off our campus, so I resigned myself to being followed by this fucker everywhere. Junior year came around, and it seemed that finally Fishface had given up. I could not be more wrong, though. It was pointed out to me by friends who knew about the stalking that he was in the background of my every move. Throughout the year, he would get closer and closer, until it eventually became worse than I'd ever dealt with before. I was a member of campus conservationists, and we were selling reusable grocery bags in lieu of our state banning plastic. After about 45 minutes of peace, I glanced to my right, only to see him there, hiding just around the corner out of sight, staring directly at me. Ice-cold fear ran down my spine, and my stomach dropped. I tore my gaze away and tried to hide my panic. He had never been this close to me since freshman year. There was no mistaking it. He was here for me, and me alone. I texted my girlfriend and let her know what was happening. I'll be honest when I say the rest is kind of a blur. I was too panicked to even remember how we got back to my dorm safely. I thank God every day for my ultra-protective girlfriend. Just 2 days after that, he appeared in the hallway outside of my class. It was just reaching the end, and I was ready to call it a day. I glanced at my watch. 2:45 p.m. I wandered into the bathroom, ignoring Fishface lurking around the corner. I did my business and approached the door. It began to open, so I called out, "Oh, I got it." I opened it for the next person to come in. Fishface. I felt my face go pale and my breath hitch. He stared directly at me with those creepy-ass blue eyes, his giant floppy lips pulled into a small smirk, before he turned and disappeared down the hall. My heart thumped in my chest as I re-entered the classroom. I felt myself shaking and tried to hide it. All that kept running through my head was, what was he doing? Why was he trying to get into the women's bathroom? I glanced down at my watch again and knew I didn't have time to wait for my girlfriend, as the class was minutes from ending. I asked the girl next to me to walk with me to my next class instead. She agreed without hesitation. She was actually a very nice girl, and I thank God for that. I finished my final class for the day and sped back to my dorm. Needless to say, I did not get much sleep that night. I reported everything to security the following morning. I was met with the same pressing questions and doubts. I threw everything I had at them and asked them to watch the security cameras outside my classroom to see him attempt to corner me in the bathroom. I had to even threaten them to contact state police before they finally relented and promised to investigate my claims. They informed me, though, that no action would be taken. They said they could find no evidence of the incidences. When questioned, Fishface said that him appearing around my classrooms and frequented spots around campus were purely coincidental, and he felt so awkward he was going through this again. I took my second semester of junior year off for unrelated reasons, yet I'm relieved to not be on campus with that creep. He's still there. The other victims have mostly transferred to other universities, due to the college's general mistreatment and poor administration. I start my senior year this August at the same university. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to step up his game. I listen to enough true crime to know what could happen, and it scares me like few things ever have.